Thanks for coming out. It's fantastic to have everyone here at the Henry Ford Foundation membership meeting. I'm Brandon Hoffner, Executive Director. Just a couple bookkeeping things. These restrooms don't work. There's porta potties out here, so that's where you want to go if you need to use the restroom. Excited about our panel today. This is kind of the kickoff for us for our Henry's Fork Day celebration. Be able to tell you a little bit about our work and see a portion of what we're doing at the foundation, and have a conversation with Matt and Jack and Christina. If you have other questions or there's other topics you want to cover, feel free to call us, stop on by the office, right on Main Street in Ashton. We would love to have additional conversations with you if there's other questions you have that we don't cover today. We hope to see you out under the tent on Saturday evening. It'd be great to have you there at the auction and the event. So if you have time, please join us. With that, I'll turn it over to Jamie.
Jasper and I will apologize in advance. You're stuck with us this year. We gave Rob a well-earned break. So us on the communications team are going to do what we should be able to do, which is communicate about all the work, amazing work that's been going on science team and all the programs that we have going on at the foundation. And Jasper just reminded me, so my name is Jamie Powell, Communications and Outreach Director. I've been with the foundation for about 10 years.
And I'm Jasper Davis. I'm the Outreach and Communications Coordinator. I've been with the foundation for 3 years.
We'll be your hosts for the first 30 minutes. We'll give you a quick rundown of how the year went, some of the key programs and accomplishments. We'll talk a bit about the challenges that we're facing, and then kind of what's next, the next frontier for our programmatic work. And then the second half of the meeting, we'll bring Matt, Christina, and Jack up front, and you get to ask the science team whatever you want. So that'll be fun too. Okay, turn it over to Jasper to get us rolling.
Alright, so I'm just going to start off by giving a brief overview of some of our accomplishments in the past year and a little bit of some of the highlights with some of our key programs that we have going on. Starting with education. So primarily, most of our focus with education up until the last few years had been on Trout in the Classroom in partnership with Idaho Fish and Game. And we started that program in 2012. It was just one tank with the 5th grade class at Ashton Elementary. But then last year we were able to expand that program and reach 5 classes, over 130 students, with several schools within the Fremont County School District, which was really great. As part of that program, students get to get a lesson from us every other week related to rainbow trout, habitat, water quality, all kinds of different things. And then in May, they go out onto the river with us for a full day, and they do a trout release field trip. So this year, between all of the classes, they released about 350 rainbow trout at Ashton Reservoir, which was pretty good, especially compared to past years. And then in August, they get the opportunity to participate in Youth on the Fly, where they get to learn how to cast and fly fish. But this is a picture of one of the students who participated in our field trip last year. He's a 3rd grader from Teton Elementary School, and he had never gone on a field trip ever before, and he was so excited. He was extremely grateful. He never thought he'd even be able to go on a field trip. And so he wrote thank you so many different times in this letter. He hugged me about 20 times throughout the day, and he couldn't express his gratitude enough, which I think was really heartwarming. In terms of high school students, we do a lot of work primarily with Madison High School on the South Fork. Dave Westcamp, he does a lot of restoration work with us. He's a consultant with us down on the South Fork. And so the students with Madison High School, and this year it was Ryrie High School, they were able to, in the spring, collect a lot of cuttings from some of the native trees and shrubs. And then they plant those in their greenhouse, grow them, and then in the fall they come out with us and plant them on our restoration sites, primarily Rainy Creek. So last year they were able to plant 400 trees, which is really cool. And I just wanted to point out that this year, when Matt and I were interviewing for our buyer's internship position, which is our local internship, almost all of the students except for one had mentioned that they had either helped us with the tree planting or had seen presentations from us when we visited Madison High School because they have a really great environmental science program there. And that includes this year's buyer's intern, Stephen Gentile, and I'll introduce the interns formally in just a second. Lastly, this is 37 years of our internship program this year. And so I wanted all of the interns to stand up really quick, and I'll briefly introduce them. We get 6 interns throughout the United States that visit. So over here, we have Stephen Gentile, raise your hand. He is our local buyer's intern this year, and he attends Boise State University. And then we have Madeline Anderson, who is from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. We have Ariana Ardell, who is from St. Lawrence University. And then we have Aman Javad, who is from Stanford University. Teddy Montalvo, who is from the University of Montana Western, but also this is the first time that we're hosting a student from the Bacchus Climate Institute. We have Ella Paney, and most of you are familiar with Rich and Millie Paney, who own Trout Hunter, and she is with Washington and Lee University this year as one of the night interns. And then also, this isn't one of our official HFF interns, but we have Dara over here. Can you remind me of your last name, Dara? I'm so sorry. Okay, so Dara is doing a lot of work as another intern with Harriman State Park. And so Ella and Dara, you'll see them around Harriman State Park this year doing a lot of surveying. And Dara will be there at Henry's Fork Days this Saturday. Moving on to outreach, this is something that we've also continued to expand in the last few years and greatly improve the types of events and the efforts that we have going on. So last year was our second summer that we participated with our Morning Bites program. So staff members, interns, board members, volunteers, we were out on the river for 44 mornings last summer. At access sites such as Stonebridge, Chester Dam, Trout Hunter, and Stonebridge, Fox Canyon, that's the one I was reading, thank you. But that's a really great program, and this summer is our 3rd year doing that, so we continue to see success from that. In terms of community events, our science team was able to present over 40 presentations last year with the scientific work that they've been doing. And then we also, we tabled at about 12 tabling events in the community. So that would be expos, festivals such as the Henry's Fork Wildlife Alliance Wildlife Festival, Island Park Fest, Teton Valley Earth Day Festival, those types of events. And then in terms of social media, we've also continued to grow our reach, and we now have 12,000 followers on our platforms, which include Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, which is a lot more than we used to have. And then we tried to kind of calculate how many people within the community we think were reached or impacted by these programs, minus social media. And so we came up with a number of 5,000 community members that were positively impacted by these programs, which I think is a huge success. And then we have Voice of the River. So Matt Hively over here, he is our Voice of the River. And he works really hard to maintain river access and riparian fencing and do all of the things that we care about on the river behind the scenes. So I just wanted to highlight some of the things that he's accomplished in the last year, starting with the planning and zoning meetings. A lot of us know that there were the proposals for development at Henry's Lake Flats, and Matt and some of the other members of our staff attended those hearings, but total, Matt told me when I last asked him about this that he attended about 10 planning and zoning hearings in 2024, which is great. Some of those we also gave comments at as well. And then in terms of river cleanups, we had 3 river cleanups last year. 10 volunteers donated a total of 130 volunteer hours, which is awesome. And I wanted to call attention to the picture that's being held with the fish on it here. So this was an ode because last year was our 40th anniversary to our very first river cleanup in 2009. And I'll pass this around so that you can see it. But basically, at that very first river cleanup, we did a community art project where everybody who helped out that day left their handprint, and we called it Helping Hands of the Henry's Fork. And so this one was 40 years of Fish and Friends, and we had some of the participants on this day help us with this art piece. In terms of Chester Dam access, that's another thing that Matt has been directly involved in. This would mark 25 years that we've been directly involved in advocating to maintain access at Chester Dam. And because of the advocacy work that we've done over the years, a lot of us are familiar with the fact that the road right now isn't in really great condition. It's kind of terrible to drive on. There's some parts that have kind of fallen off down into the canal and so on and so forth. However, Idaho Fish and Game was able to acquire funds, and they have told us that they are working to regrade this road and add new gravel, and it will be a completely fresh road base, which I think is pretty great. And then Matt will continue to advocate for our river access sites in the coming months and years. Another program that we see a lot of success with is our long-term monitoring efforts. So starting with the Buffalo Fish Ladder, this year marks 20 years that we have monitored fish populations at the Fish Ladder. And then we also finally have 10 years of aquatic insect data. We work with 3 entomologists. They're all from the same organization in Montana. So the group is called River Continuum Concepts. And they come out and they work with us in the spring to collect aquatic insect samples, and they help us analyze those samples. And so we will continue to sample every spring to get a better understanding of what's going on with our aquatic insect populations. And finally on this one, we have our water quality monitoring. As most of you know, we have the largest water quality monitoring network of sondes, I think in the western United States. This is the last time I checked, I believe. And so our field team goes out there all of the time, and they are continuing to take samples also manually to calibrate our sondes with turbidity and water quality. But that's another program that will continue. So Jack McLaren over here, he spent 6 years a while back mapping out Island Park Reservoir, collecting data. He's extremely passionate about Island Park Reservoir. And so last year, he created this amazing depth map for us. And this is a really great resource. We've already rolled this out slowly to some of the tabling events that we've attended. And everyone has been so excited about it whenever we have shared this map with them. And the goal is that this year we're hoping to formally print it, just like some of the Henry's Fork access maps that are on the back table. And so that's the next steps there. But in the last week, so you guys are some of the first people to hear about this, Jack and Melissa, who is our data consultant with us, Melissa Meridian, they rolled out this really cool Island Park Reservoir water quality web app to add to all of the other really great resources we have on our river conditions page on our website. And so these are just a couple of screenshots that we pulled from this new application, but it shows some really great information. We have more resources on the back table for you to grab if you'd like to learn more about it, but you can check out temperature at the dam gates, dissolved oxygen, turbidity, chlorophyll, I believe, or is it cyano? Okay, yeah. Chlorophyll. And then there's a few other tabs up here that talk about some of you can look at data from the profiling. We have our field crew that goes out every Thursday and continues to sample and collect that information with our sondes, and some other really great resources on this. And so I encourage you after this meeting to check this out and look at all of the tabs that they put together and check out that really cool information. Our Precision Water Management Program is another program that we've seen huge success with. As we know, we can't always control our conditions when it comes to increasing temperatures or how much water falls as precipitation. And in the last few years, we've noticed that things are changing and we're seeing less precipitation in general. And despite this, our Precision Water Management Program works on making sure that we can keep as much water in Island Park Reservoir as possible. And they have this motto right here, taking into account every drop of water, every day, everywhere within the watershed. And they do a really great job with that. And we all know at this point, probably, that winter flows are the most important factor that contribute to trout populations in Island Park Reservoir and below the dam. And so that's one reason that this program is so important. And I know that last year we didn't really see the precipitation, snowfall, and so forth that we were expecting to see. But despite the circumstances that we were given with climate, our team made the most of it. And so I just wanted to share that with the Drought Management Planning Committee, which our science team is a part of, in 2024, they set a target for winter stream flow to 275 CFS. But we were able to achieve a little bit more than that. It ended up being 288 CFS of water, which is higher than it would have done if we weren't involved in that process. And since 2017, outflow from the reservoir has beat our expectations based on the water supply available every single year. And we have averaged about 100 CFS higher or more water than anticipated in all 7 of those years, which I think is a really huge win. And we will continue these efforts. So the average, that 100 CFS more a year, kind of equates to an average amount of 500 trout that are an increase in the population for trout populations in this river reach, which is a 15% increase. Another really cool thing that our Precision Water Management Program was able to accomplish last year, they received $500,000. It's a Water Smart grant from the federal government. And so they used this money to be able to produce 6 new web applications for us. This is just a screenshot of one of the tabs, but there's a lot of different resources that they put together. And so this is a really great tool. We already know that we've seen really great success with Rob's Daily Water Report, and his email listserv has grown to over 370 individuals who get that report every single day, and they rely directly on that information. And there are water managers in our watershed who have told Rob themselves that they look at that report every day, and it really does, along with these applications that we rolled out last year, help them to inform their decision making so that they can increase efficiency and make the best decisions for everybody. And then we have Farms and Fish. So a lot of you know that 2 years ago we were able to receive another Water Smart federal grant, a little bit over $1 million at the time. And the point of that grant, the purpose of that grant, was to line Conant Creek Canal. And we worked with Friends of the Teton River, the Nature Conservancy, Conant Creek Canal Company, and Fremont Madison Irrigation District to do this. But the other half of the money, because the program cost us over $2 million, came from all of you and all of our really generous members. And so I want to applaud you that you made this work possible, because this project finished up in November of last year, and we were able to line 5.7 miles of Conant Creek Canal, which is a really big deal. And before the lining of this canal, they were experiencing a lot of loss with the seepage of water. And so after it was lined, we were predicting, and we've already started to see the results of this, that we would be able to save more water in Island Park Reservoir. So that would equate to about 3,300 Olympic swimming pools worth of water annually. But if you want a different number for that, that's about 2,000 acre feet that's saved, a 39% increase. And then as part of this program, we also help them to update the headgate and install flow meters and update other types of equipment. We have some solar panels down there. And so because of all of those efforts, we're also reducing the diesel fuel that is consumed by 700 gallons a year, which I think is pretty cool. This picture over here is the final product, what it looks like right now, that our Farms and Fish staff member Daniel Wilcox took for us. And then lastly, we have the South Fork Initiative. And I want to preface this by reminding everybody that this program is funded separately from all of these other programs that I mentioned previously, but we are still continuing to expand our efforts on the South Fork. So we do already have some water quality monitoring that we do down there. However, there are other funds that we had earned through another federal Water Smart grant last year in the total of about $400,000, and some of those funds are meant to also improve and expand our water quality monitoring network on the South Fork. And then Dave Westcamp, who is our consultant that I mentioned earlier, who does the restoration work down there, he still has some really great plans for this year to continue to keep working on the restoration sites to improve habitat for the Yellowstone cutthroat trout and other cold water aquatic species that are down there. And then finally, we hired Devin Ince, who is our South Fork Initiative Coordinator. And so he will be really ramping up efforts on the South Fork throughout the next year. And working with him, one of the interns that I introduced earlier, Ariana, if you can raise your hand one more time, she will be devoted solely down on the South Fork. She's going to get our Morning Bites program up and running down there, and hopefully that program will be as successful as Morning Bites on the Henry's Fork.
Cool. So now sort of the downer, but the reality of some of the challenges we face. We know that like many western rivers, the Henry's Fork is facing less water and warmer temperatures. So thinking about what those challenges are and then what the next steps might be in terms of how we can address some of those issues. So data tells us that summer air temperatures are increasing at a rate of about 1 degree Fahrenheit per decade. Over the past 40 years, that's about a 4 degree Fahrenheit increase. And that's sort of the beginning of some of these other issues, because warmer air temperatures really plays a key role in the lower water supply that we're experiencing. This graph you'll see here, average natural flow in the Henry's Fork watershed has decreased by 15% since 2000. So this is that 1978, the 70s, 80s, and 90s window here. You can see a significant trend to the last 20, 25 years. It gets a little more bleak if you zoom in just on Island Park. That number becomes 22% lower. We know that having less water is going to decrease our winter flows as well. Jasper talked about all the hard work that we do to conserve water for winter flows. Essentially, those programs take a slightly below average water year and make it an average water year, or an average water year and make it a slightly above average water year. But when what Mother Nature gives us keeps decreasing, those winter flows are going to keep decreasing as well, even with our amazing work on top. So those trout populations as a result are going to be lower as well, which obviously many of us are experiencing already. Water quality, those are things like water temperatures, dissolved oxygen, and turbidity are also affected. We're going to see warmer and more turbid water. In terms of hatches and aquatic insects, and Jasper mentioned this a little bit, we just finished 10 years of aquatic insect monitoring. Those populations are surprisingly, I guess in this case, really, really healthy. Some of the best numbers we've seen in a decade. So why are hatches shifting in a way that isn't reflected in the health of the insect community? We think a lot of that might be due to temperature, but we're doing research and studies like the hatch survey that I'm sure you've heard of to try and really get at that relationship. I'll also note, so these temperatures and less water supply, other than the winter flow obviously decreasing trout numbers, they're not at a level that are harming the trout at an individual level yet, but we know they are having a significant impact on the fishing experience, especially come midsummer. So that makes it a top priority for sure, and something to be grateful for, that we're not watching significant fish health effects yet, but this is a good time to really start addressing this. So what's next? What makes us unique among Western rivers is the team of people that we have and the community that supports us, the people in this room, the entire team down at HFF, and all the people who care about this river. We have the capacity to not only make a measurable impact on fisheries health, but to be the leaders in what's next for fisheries conservation. We've got Rob's team has got some big ideas and they're really exciting. It's a really cool thing to think about what we might be capable of over the next 5 to 10 years. We talk a lot about water conservation, so I'll say first, things like youth education, fencing, access, things that have been fundamental since the very beginning of this organization are going to continue to be core to who we are. Those things have to continue, and as the years go on, we know that things can get warmer and drier, so water conservation also has to be a really key part of that core programmatic work. Along those lines, we're going to continue to push forward in water conservation. We won a federal grant of about $400,000. Jasper talked about this for a snowmelt study. So we're gonna get better forecasts of snowmelt, installing high mountain weather stations to improve the data that managers get so that we can better understand that relationship between snowpack, snowmelt, and what's in the river. We also we won a $200,000 federal grant for a drought management planning effort, which will improve infrastructure at Highland Park Dam, allow the reservoir to fill earlier in the spring, which should improve early spring flow conditions, as well as conserve water, boost trout populations, and winter flows. So water conservation has to continue, but we know that on its own isn't quite enough. It's not gonna get us to where we really wanna be. The next frontier has to be water quality. I know many of you have heard of the DIRT plan. We also are really lucky that we have, as Jasper mentioned, one of the top water quality monitoring networks around. 10 years of aquatic insect data. We have a really strong foundation to build from, but the next level is gonna be this DIRT plan. DIRT, kudos to Jack, stands for Developing Infrastructure to Reduce Temperatures and Turbidity. So this is an investigation, and you'll see a very expensive long-term investigation and implementation of solutions, engineering and nature-based solutions to reduce water temperatures and turbidity in the reservoir and what comes out. So that might be treating Highland Park Reservoir like a fish tank and adding a bubbler, like adding oxygen into the reservoir. It might be a variable elevation withdrawal system where you can pull water from different depths based on where the best water quality is, or tributary restoration. A lot of different tools are gonna get investigated to see how can we really make an impact to reduce water temperatures and turbidity. So while we can't magically make more water, we do have a path forward that's really exciting, and there's meaningful positive impact possible here. But you will maybe have picked up on the fact that I said the word federal grant for all three of these. We have one of them in hand, one of them is a question mark, and one of them is looking iffy. So we are gonna need a lot of support. We're not backing down. These projects have to happen no matter what. It's critical for the future of this river. But we are going to need a lot of help and a lot of support. So we appreciate everyone in this room, and every voice and every one of us is going to make a difference as this goes forward, whether it's literally lending your voice to the voice of the river through sharing our stories online, or telling a friend about us or a family member, whether you volunteer with Jack out on the reservoir or at river cleanup, attending an event, bringing a friend to an event, donating, no matter what it is. It's going to take this entire community, I think, to tackle the challenges ahead, but we are hopeful and optimistic and ready, and we have an amazing team in place. So we're excited about the next 5 to 10 years. Sometimes that feels weird to say, but we're looking forward with hope. All right, that's it for the plan stuff. Now we got questions.
So this is the fun part. We have 3 panelists on our science team, so I'm gonna have them introduce themselves in just a second. But can you 3 turn your chairs around? And we have about 30 minutes to ask whatever questions we have in the room. But I'll go through introductions and such first. All right, so Matt, starting with you, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Matt Hidley. I've been with the foundation since 2019, started as a conservation technician, and in 2020 I moved into my current role as the aquatic resources manager, and I focus kind of 2 overlapping areas. Easily, I think it's best to think of as regulatory processes that's being involved at the local level, planning and zoning, state level with the public agencies, and the federal level with the public agencies. And then also access. So I focus on maintaining access, improving access, and securing new access should those opportunities arise.
Christina?
Hi everyone, my name is Christina Morissette. I am our Climate Adaptation Program Manager. I started with the Henry Spark Foundation in 2015 as a summer intern, and I've since been Rob's research assistant. I did my PhD with the Henry Spark Foundation, and now I'm in charge of our Climate Adaptation Program. And so when I think of that program, I kind of think of 3 A's: analyze, anticipate, adapt. So analyzing climate and water data to anticipate short-term and long-term futures to help the community adapt accordingly. And so in my work, I do both kind of the physical science side of things, so thinking about these grant projects that were presented, I'm doing the science, I'm helping with the science on snowmelt and drought planning, but then I also do social science work and communications work, and I'm the lead stakeholder engager for Jack's Dirt Plan.
Okay, Jack, your turn.
My name is Jack McLaren. I'm the Aquatic Ecology Program Manager for the Henry Sport Foundation. I started here as a graduate student intern in 2016, and got both my master's and my PhD working on research questions on the Henry Sport River, and then was hired on full-time in 2023. My program is all about the aquatic ecology of the Henry Sport River, mostly focusing on analyzing the data that we have, taking the long-term monitoring that amazing 10 years of recent data, as well as looking into historical data to identify ways, win-win situations that or new potential projects that, like Jamie said, kind of are the next step. Identifying those opportunities to help improve water quality, fisheries, and the fishing experience.
Okay, so I will start off by asking one question to each of them just to get things going, and then I encourage everybody after that point to ask whatever is on your mind so that you can leave feeling like you got the answers that you needed today.
If they go too long, they get one of these.
Yes, so awesome. Yeah, just a brief reminder to our panelists that we want to keep our answers as concise as possible so that everybody leaves with their questions answered. Jack, I'm going to start with you. So the DIRT plan is a big highlight for many people. Can you give us an update on the progress that you've made and what's been done as part of the DIRT plan and what's coming up this summer?
Great question. The key thing we're focusing on with the DIRT plan right now is, like Jamie said, looking at Island Park Reservoir like a fish tank and investigating whether or not we can add oxygen to the reservoir. That would assist with a lot of the fish habitat, water quality, and management issues at Island Park Dam. And so in order to start that process, we need to get an engineering understanding of what would that take? How would that work? Is that possible? And I'm not an engineer, I'm an ecologist. So we brought in some consultants using some federal money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And we did something that I've wanted to do for like 10 years now, which is a sediment oxygen demand study on Island Park Reservoir. That tells you how much oxygen is being consumed by the lake itself and the sediments at the bottom of the reservoir. So we did some sediment sampling, we looked at that dissolved oxygen, and that will help scale the size of the facilities and what that would cost and how realistic that is and what the cost benefits of that are. So that was a lot of fun. That happened back in May, and then we're continuing our regular monitoring of Island Park Reservoir and doing some outreach like the website that was put up. So if you're going to be out recreating Island Park Reservoir or are curious what the water quality could be coming out of the reservoir in the near future, that website's for you.
Thank you, Jack. This next question is for Christina. We know that a lot of anglers are seeing changes to their favorite hatches, and HFF has 10 years of insect data. Tell us about our hatch survey and how it contributes and helps us better understand these changes and why this hatch survey is meaningful.
Yeah, so Rob did all the analysis this winter to figure out, 10 years, what's going on with insect populations. And we ran information every which way, and we are seeing that PMDs are decreasing in terms of their populations at Flat Rock and St. Anthony, but everywhere else, our insect populations are super stable in terms of the number of insects on the bottom of the river. But of course, that's not what folks are experiencing on the river. Folks are experiencing hatches that are smaller, hatches that are inconsistent, they're not happening at the time of day that we're used to. And so, our insect population numbers are saying that, okay, the population is the same, but it's their behavior that's changing. So, that's not something we can capture when we're scrubbing rocks on St. Patrick's Day in March. Where we can get that information is from you all. You all are our eyes on the river, and so as you're visiting the river, as you're seeing bugs or you're not seeing bugs, that's data, that's information. And so last year, because of the asks and the concerns from this community, I put together the Hatch survey, and so it's really simple. It honestly takes 2 minutes. I can see that in the people who have responded. It's an average time of 2 minutes. And it asks you, where did you visit the river? When did you visit the river? And what did you see? Even if you saw nothing at all. And as soon as that information comes in, I look at it, and if I'm like, that looks a little wonky, I might send you an email and follow up, just to make sure that we're getting the highest quality data possible. But that's where the hatch survey is coming in, to get at that behavior piece in terms of hatches, and then hopefully with enough information, we can maybe tie that to air temperature, water temperature, different kinds of weather events. And we can also compare it to, like Rob has hatch journals going back to the 70s, 80s. So we can compare that to, okay, this is when we were seeing bugs on the river at these locations way back in the 70s. When are we seeing them now? So we can connect these current river observations to those of the past. So I also invite you, if you have hatch journals from years past, I would love to scan them or get that information from you somehow. So that's kind of the information and background for the hatch survey, and if you want to be able to have a card to be able to take with you so you can add that to your fishing experience, there are cards on the back.
Thank you, Christina. My last question that I'll ask is for Matt. So Matt, what is one success that you've had attending the planning and zoning meeting hearings, and has anything positive come from that?
Yeah, well, I walk into the room and they're like, oh, HFF's here. Let's just give them what they want, right? so that's pretty much, yeah, that's a huge success. But in all seriousness, I mean, just learning the process is probably the biggest success, because I've been able to, the process is one thing on paper and it's a different thing in practice. And so getting a grip on like the nuances and what does staff do versus the commission versus what the applicants try, to do versus what the residents may be doing there, offering comments and how that all goes. And seeing that's kind of been illuminating, and it has guided my interaction with the Planning and Zoning Commission, with the whole process. And learning like, okay, talking about that falls on deaf ears. Maybe we don't talk about that. How can we be more effective? And so I guess the positive is I think I've become more effective in that arena. And then kind of a bonus is I'm no longer a kind of lurker in the audience. People are starting to recognize me, and people are approaching me, and beginning to trust me, I guess, if you will, and are even reaching out by phone or email after the fact, looking for advice, looking for technical expertise, and so I think that's very positive, and I think will allow me to be more effective into the future going forward.
Thank you, Matt. All right, so now the time is yours. I just ask, when you raise your hand and ask the question, state up front which of the panelists you're asking the question to. And I will put a couple example questions up here on this slide just in case you need some inspiration.
I have a question for Jack. Jack, I'd like you to just assume that there is a way to inject significant amounts of oxygen in Island Park Reservoir. Would you explain to us, please, what you see and how the positive effects of that would work?
Yeah, that's a good question. The effect that we know for sure right now is it would increase the amount of fish habitat in Island Park Reservoir itself significantly, up to 300% increase in total fish habitat available in the reservoir. So for the fishery in the reservoir, well, that could basically create a new fishery that would be available for y'all to take advantage of. The migratory fish moving from Island Park Reservoir into the river upstream. So we know that would be greatly increase the number of kokanee salmon, the number of rainbow trout, the number of cutthroat trout, brook trout moving from the reservoir upstream to spawn and then are more available for fly anglers. Or if you like to fish at like McRae's Bridge or go out to the west end to fish the springs out there, that would be more available. The water quality benefits would include potentially, and this is something that we're investigating right now, this summer we're going to be collecting more data about algae blooms in Island Park Reservoir, nutrient and metal amounts in the reservoir, to see if oxygenation would be effective at reducing nutrient concentrations in the reservoir, and that would reduce the amount of algae in the reservoir, and that algae is a key component in the turbidity downstream from the reservoir. So it could reduce the algae and the harmful algae blooms. It would reduce the amount of turbidity coming out of the reservoir, and it would improve the fish habitat in the reservoir itself. It could also make operation of the outflow of Island Park Reservoir, there's a power plant on one side of the reservoir and the original pipe through the dam on the other side. That power plant facility has legal constraints. They cannot run their power and their outflow unless they're hitting dissolved oxygen targets downstream. And it's happening now. It happened the other week where they were no longer able to meet their dissolved oxygen requirements because there's only 1 milligram per liter. They need to hit 6. There's only 1 in the reservoir that they're drawing from. Their blower glitches or something, and they have to switch flow over to the other outflow. So this constant flow switching, it wastes water for one. The flow switches are never perfect, and the water quality coming out of the original gates, the deeper location, is generally worse than the power plant.
Worse
So
in what respect? Temperature, turbidity, what?
Turbidity, yeah, it's
How about temperature?
temperature is slightly colder, only by about a degree or so. But so yeah, sure, you get cooler water, you get a little bit better oxygenated water, because that pipe that's why they switched the water over to that pipe, is it was retrofitted in the 80s in order to like perfectly oxygenate the water. But we saw turbidity go from, less than 5 NTUs, the units that we use to measure turbidity, and anything below 5 is like, to anglers, that's clear water. It looks clear. You can see the bottom of the river. That's what we're shooting for. That's what we want. That's what's historically been the case on the Henry's Fork. It shot up to over, it was about like 8 or 9.
Yeah, well, almost a 10.
Almost to 10,
For a couple, yeah.
which
just
to anglers
instantly.
is very turbid. Like, would affect how you see the river, and could potentially affect how fish behave in the short term as well. So keeping that from happening is a big priority for us, and that's another benefit. They wouldn't have to worry about oxygenating the water anymore. It would just come to the power plant in perfect shape. So that's hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you.
I got off on a tangent.
You were next in the back.
Oh, thanks. I don't know who to direct this at, probably Jack. I think all of us are aware that there have been changing priorities at the federal level in terms of grants and contract administering, and I just posed the general question as to what those impacts have been on current programs, and to what degree you anticipate they will be jeopardized in the future, and what could we do about it if they are jeopardized?
That sounds like a Christina.
That's
question.
to you, Rob.
I'm just trying to spread the responsibility
As
here.
respectfully as it was asked.
Yeah.
You want to attempt Christina, and Rob can hop in if you'd like.
Or make Brandon do it.
Yeah.
There you go.
Are you saying yes, you want me to do that?
Yes.
So yeah, right, we've invested hundreds and hundreds of hours into grants that we've been awarded. And we've spent an additional time this spring trying to figure out whether that invested time was going to ever come to fruition and result in an actual grant that we were awarded. So we have spent a lot of time as a staff, a lot of your time that you supported, working through that process. Of course, the amounts of dollars out there and the types of programs we're working on make that worth it, but it has been a lengthy and somewhat frustrating process. A piece of funding that we didn't even talk about, or a piece of work that we didn't even talk about, here though, and Jasper mentioned Farms and Fish. Through the University of Idaho, we were going to have millions of dollars to work with farmers on on-field practices that were going to benefit the watershed. And in one day, $59 million that the University of Idaho was supposed to have disappeared. And so we also spent a lot of time on that grant and lost that money, that opportunity to work with folks. And there's honestly farmers out there that are already invested in that program that are left holding the bag too, right? A lot of, even the Farm Bureau said, we don't know what we're gonna do now. They were part of that grant as well. So yeah, it's had an impact on the organization. We've had to adjust and rethink about what we're doing. Now on the positive side, we're going to go forward and figure out how we can use state money and private dollars and how we can better tell our story to private funders, and hopefully acquire funding that meets, matches, and exceeds what we would have gotten from the federal government before kind of freezes and everything else started to happen. Does that answer what you were looking for?
Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. All right, next over here.
Yeah, question for Jack. So, drawing water from different levels in the reservoir, what are the challenges? I mean, equipment that's gotta be a huge capital investment to be able to deal with.
That would be a huge capital investment. Yeah. The ideas that we have when it comes to altering how the fundamental ways in which Island Park Reservoir works are big ideas and big capital investment for sure. From a very practical point of view, it would involve building essentially a new outflow for the reservoir, or retrofitting one of the old outflows to Island Park Reservoir. That would allow you to draw water from different levels in the reservoir. That's something that's been done. None of what I've proposed for Island Park Reservoir, the oxygenation or variable elevation outflow, is as without precedent. This is stuff that's been done on reservoirs throughout the West and throughout the nation. But yeah, it would be a really big project. And the whole idea there is to basically allow us the flexibility to select the water quality downstream, or at least have some level of influence on it. And that could get really complicated. So these are some long-term ideas meant to address these long-term challenges of warmer temperatures, less water availability, and the fish population and habitat issues that go along with that.
Just a quick follow-up question to this. So those are called temperature control structures, TCS. What's the depth at the dam face and what's the temperature differential from top to bottom?
Great question. Yeah, so it's 72 feet deep. It's like 21.5 meters.
Okay.
And the temperature difference depends. When we start the spring, so like as of a couple weeks ago, before draft had begun and we were just moving the same amount of water in as we were out, it was about, I have to do the Celsius to Fahrenheit conversions in my head because we collect everything in Celsius because we're a bunch of nerds. It was 62, 63 at the surface, and it was down around 45 to 48 at the bottom. So you start the spring around 15, and that's even after of like a month of where you're pulling water from the deepest point in the reservoir. If you could pull from the surface starting in the spring, that temperature difference, it would be, instead of the water at the bottom would be colder because you wouldn't be sending the cold water downstream, you'd be sending surface water downstream. That would be like an example of how you could manage that. So that's where we start when the reservoir is drafted very rapidly. That temperature difference degrades rather quickly because you're just pulling all that cold water, sending it all downstream, and what's left is whatever was, that water at the surface. So like by the midpoint in July, most likely, barring some freak weather stuff, it'll be, it'll be 20 Celsius, so like 72 at the surface and like 68 at the bottom. There will only be like 4 or 5 degrees Fahrenheit difference between the surface and the bottom at that point.
Here for Christina, how was the salmon fly hatch this year?
Man, I was on vacation.
You missed it, all right.
It's right before intern season, so it's a good time to take a break. Yeah, I think we were anticipating it happening earlier than usual, and I think it did happen earlier than usual. I think right now, across the board, based on kind of the thermal units in the river, hatches should be happening 5 to 6 days earlier than usual. I think in May they were happening 4 to 5 days earlier than what we've seen over the last 10 years. And so I guess you all will have to tell me what your impressions were of the quality of the hatch, but in terms of the timing of the hatch, it was early.
Earlier. Well, I don't keep a journal, but we live not too far from the Henry's Fork, and every year I've seen salmon flies around June 1st, but the last 2 years I haven't seen any at our property, so. But that's around June 1st. So.
Which aligns with the idea, right, that it's happening earlier, so it's turning off earlier.
Yeah. But I didn't see them earlier either.
What I have seen is deer flies. I've never seen deer flies this early before. It's amazing.
That's no fun.
Yeah, that was no fun. I was out on the river today, and we just had deer flies. I got bit bad right on the back of my neck. That was funny.
I've never seen deer flies before July.
Yeah.
Jack, can I ask you a follow-up question? I know they've aerated Henry's Lake in the past. Was that considered a success?
So that was a little bit different than what we're proposing. That's more like small and local areas, and they were using just air and bubblers, so atmospheric air, just 70% nitrogen. They're using that. What we're proposing is to use pure oxygen, either trucked in or generated on site, and then injected via extensive system, probably hoses, something along those lines. And the idea is to oxygenate the entire, what we call hypolimnion, the lower level of cold water in Island Park Reservoir, as opposed to what's going on in Henry's Lake, which is trying to pump some air, like get some oxygen in certain areas of the lake over the winter time. We're trying to do this over the course of an entire summer season, essentially. We can do it under the ice too, but usually oxygen's not a problem under the ice at Island Park Reservoir.
Cliff, I saw your hand raised.
I've used your website, Christina, a few times to fill in the hatch. It seems like it might benefit if you had an intensity button. Because I'll go out and I'll see 1 PMD.
That counts.
And
that counts.
I know, but 5 years ago I would have gone out and I said, yes, I saw PMDs, but I saw 800.
And I feel that. The reason why I haven't had an intensity button is because that is different to everyone based on your experience on the river. And so what's high to someone is going to be medium to someone else, and so that's difficult to capture in the intent of this study.
But maybe over 20 years, it works out. That right? I mean, sure, at any one point in time, yes. But a time series of data, if it switches to nobody saying the intensity is heavy, it matters.